Welcome to the John Freakin' Muir Pod. Lace up those boots and sling on the pack for a romp through trails, short and long. With your host and Renaissance man, Doc. It's time to embrace the suck.
Welcome back to another week on the trail. I'm Doc, and this is the John Freakin' Muir Pod. Let's start off with the obligatory reminder. If you are enjoying the podcast, take just a minute and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. And if you're not enjoying the pod, well, just go ahead and keep that to yourself. All right, let's get to this week's guest, who I am very excited to talk to. Our guest today has 2 of the American long trails under his belt, and he is looking to put the 3rd notch in his belt in a very big way. I don't want to give too much away up front. You're just going to have to stick around and listen to the entire episode if you want to hear about this. All right. He is also our first guest to have a college degree in wilderness leadership and experiential education, which I'm guessing has something to do with his trail name. Welcome to the John Freakin' Muir Pod, Carl Stanfield.
All right. Hey, Doc. Good to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us, Carl.
Yeah. I'm happy to be here. It's good to be chatting about trail stuff. I'm coming at you down here from Alabama, and so there's a little bit of an outdoor community down here, not as much as I'd like. So stuff like this is good to stay connected.
Okay. Now, I alluded to your trail name, but I didn't mention it. What is your trail name?
Yes. My trail name is Professor, or everyone just calls me Prof.
Prof. Okay. So that's an acceptable shortening of Professor, just Prof.
Yeah, I'm all about just single abbreviation or single syllable names. That's great.
Yeah, I chuckle a little bit because I'm reminded of 127, who I talked to at the end of season 1, and he got his name, his trail name, because he got stuck on his leg got stuck between 2 logs on a bridge, and he was stuck there by himself for 20 minutes, 25 minutes. And he told the story a couple times, and somebody said, "Oh, you mean like that guy that got caught, his arm got pinned by a boulder, and they made the movie about it, 127 hours." And so he got stuck with the trail name 127. I had to ask him, is it, what's the official, is it 127? Is it 127? Is it 127? And inevitably, us hikers out there, they always want to go with the shortest version of the trail name. So he was 127. So
yeah, perfect.
If you've got a polysyllabic trail name and something dangerous is happening, it might take just a split second too long for your trail family to call out to you and warn you of that. So I can see the value in that.
Yeah, that's a good point. We're all about finding shortcuts to things, aren't we?
Yeah. Hey, Prof, have you had a chance to listen to the podcast?
Yeah, I've listened to a handful of episodes now.
Okay. So you know that there is a regular segment called the Pro Tip Insight of the Week that comes towards the end of the episode. I'm going to turn to you and I'm going to say, hey, Prof, what is your Pro Tip Insight of the Week? What little tip, trick, secret, piece of wisdom can you share with our listeners to make their next outdoor experience that much more epic? So don't be surprised when we get there.
Cool. Good deal. I think I got one ready for you.
Okay. Very good. And I realized that I didn't ask you the story behind the trail name. Is it because of your education background?
Yeah, that's part of it. So I got it on the first long trail that I hiked was the Appalachian Trail back in 2018. And so I, first few guys that I was hiking with there, we talked about our background a little bit. So that had come out that I had gone to school for that. And so that was part of it. But then the other part of it was I'm just such a big planner of everything that I was kind of putting together. We weren't even like really officially hiking together yet, but I was kind of talking about different things that we could do and different ways we could break down, like, all right, we can get to this town in this many days if we do this and that sort of thing, different options. And so we were hiking together. It was towards the end of the first week, and a couple of my buddies had caught up to me at a shelter I just left a little bit before they did that day. I came up and said, hey, we've been talking. I think we got your trail name figured out. We were just talking, trying to figure out what we're going to do the next few days. And we just said, we don't even have to worry about it. We'll just ask the professor when we catch him.
Nice. Very good. So you have a very sequential and orderly approach to your planning for these long trips?
Yeah. So I found I really like to have a really detailed plan for everything. Like I just enjoy the process of coming up with the plan. But with through hiking, it's all about being adaptable. So I like having a plan, and I know that it's definitely not going to go the way that I planned it, but that's part of the plan. So I like having something there to just go from, and then knowing it's not going to go that way, but I'm okay with that.
Yeah, so you've hit upon two of the things that have come up repeatedly on the podcast, and that is half of the fun, or maybe just as much fun as the hike itself, is planning and preparing for the hike. All the research, all the the spreadsheets, the food prep, the campsites, all planned out, and so that's half of the fun at least. And
yeah,
then,
absolutely.
And then the other thing I like to say is a quote from Mike Tyson, who used to say that everybody's got a game plan till you get punched in the mouth.
Yeah, spot on.
So you could have the best plan, and day one, something comes up and you don't hit your mileage, and all of a sudden you have to adjust. And that's why you said you've got to be adaptable. Very good.
Yeah, exactly. We kind of got to the point, with my first trail family, where we'd be, especially like with hitching, we'd talk about, because we had, just some wild hitches that we'd come across, as you do, that we'd get to that and like have a day where we needed to hitch to get into town, and just staying positive, like things would either go the way that we hoped they would and we'd get what we wanted, or we'd get a really good story out of it. It was always one of the two.
Very good. I'm looking forward to some good stories, and we're going to get to your AT hike and your PCT hike a little bit later. But before we get there, got a few more things to talk about. And one is another regular feature we're doing called the Must Bring Gear Review. And here's how it works. If you were to let a stranger pack your bag with pretty much generic gear for a multi-day hike, what is the one specific piece of gear you would insist on being packed? And if you have a specific brand for that piece of gear, even better. So, Prof, what's your must bring, can't do without piece of gear?
Cool. Yeah, great question. I love gear. I love trying out all kinds of different types of gear. And so I've kind of thought about this question a little bit. And the biggest thing that I think that I like, even though I've tried alternatives, is I'm a tent person. I love having a tent. I've tried different ones, and there's, I've got some that I really like. I've used Gossamer gear tents for a while. And I've tried a tarp, and I like a lot of things about tarp camping, but especially like for long distance hiking, I feel like at the end of the day, like if I'm going to be living there for a long time, a tarp feels like a shelter and a tent feels like a home. Like just being inside a tent at the end of the day, I think it just feels a little bit homier than a tarp does. And like I said, I love a lot of things about a tarp, but I really like just the feeling of camping and the nostalgia of being in a tent and all that stuff. And so a tent would be my go-to piece of gear. I love having a tent when I'm out camping.
Okay, fair point. And what type of tent do you prefer? Do you have a particular brand? What has been the evolution of your tent game over the years?
Yeah, sure. So I started out backpacking just after high school and carrying like a 5-pound North Face tent, and then I got a Big Agnes Copper Spur 2. That's a good 3-person tent, or a 2-person tent, 3-pound 2-person tent that I really like. That's a lot more lightweight than what I was used to, and enjoyed that either by myself or with somebody else. And then researching for a thru hike, I came across these trekking pole tents and was really excited about those, and looked at a bunch of them and just decided to try out Gossamer Gear's tent, the One. And so that's the one that I've used for all my AT hike, and most of my PCT hike was in the One by Gossamer Gear. But I also really like taking a freestanding tent. Those are pretty nice to have sometimes too. So I like mixing it up.
And so how much does the Gossamer Gear One weigh?
Oh, I think the version that I used on the AT was right at about 1.5 pounds, about 24 ounces. And then of course they got the DCF one now that's under 1 pound. And that's great. I'm really excited about that. I was able to get my hands on one of those, over the holiday season. And so I think that's what I'll be using for some time to come, is that one.
Nice. That's awesome. And so what is your thru hiking kit weigh out at? What is your base weight?
Yeah, so I've tinkered around with it, and as I'm playing with new stuff, I'm usually somewhere in the range of like 9 to 12 pounds, somewhere in that kind of sweet spot.
Okay, very good. And so, what's your sleep system look like?
Yeah, so I really love a foam pad I love everything about it, except for that it's not comfortable. So I want to try to love it. I want to love it so much. I can, if I'm really exhausted, I can get okay sleep on it. But I just do so much better on an inflatable pad. So I usually have an inflatable pad. I'll play around. I keep trying to make myself like a foam pad, but I like an inflatable pad. I really liked Nemo's pads. They've held up really well for me over the years. So I got an inflatable Nemo pad, and then I haven't tried too many different quilts or sleeping bags because I got an Enlightened Equipment Revelation 20 degree before I went out on the AT, and I've loved it, and it's lasted all the way through the AT and the PCT, and it's still going strong.
If it works, if it's not broke, don't fix it. So there you go.
Yeah, exactly. That, and then also about 700 miles into the AT, I picked up an inflatable pillow, and I love it. I'm a pillow guy. I love having it.
Yeah, for a number of hikes, I said, you know what, I'm gonna go, multi-use. I'm gonna take one of my stuff sacks and fill it up with clothes and use that as a pillow. But there's no substitute for a good inflatable pillow on the trail.
Yeah, it really makes a lot more of a difference than I thought that it would.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. All right, Prof. Hey, before we get too far down the trail, let's back up a little bit and let's talk about your origin story. Background, where you grew up, kinds of hobbies and sports you involved in. Was outdoor adventure part of your life growing up? Did your parents take you on trips like this at all? So just kind of take us through all that.
Cool, sure. So I grew up, my parents and my grandparents had a really good love for the outdoors. And so my mom's parents especially, they retired around the time I was real little. And they bought a motor home and drove from Alabama all the way to Alaska and back. So that was a cool adventure that my family had done. And I grew up in East Tennessee, over right just next to the Smokies. So for being in the Southeast is not a bad spot to be as far as good outdoor opportunities. And so not really a ton of hiking growing up, but my family spent a lot of time. We usually take a week or weekend or something most summers to go out and camp somewhere. And just being out and being comfortable in a tent and being just out of the house a little bit and in an outdoor environment that my parents, and I've got one younger sister, all enjoyed being there together. So doing some of that growing up, so being comfortable in that kind of environment. And then I loved summer camp growing up. So I've been going to summer camp, working at summer camp since I was 8 years old. And so staying in a cabin, but, spending my summers outside, doing that sort of stuff. And then I also grew up pretty into sports. So I played some soccer, but basketball was my main sport. And so I played basketball from the time I was pretty little, about 8 or 9, up through high school. And I was always the tallest in my grade, so that was really helpful. And so I'm 6 feet now, and I have not grown since the day I turned 13. So the time I was 13, I was 6 feet tall. And so I thought, like, man, this is great. I'm going to keep growing. I got a shot at maybe a professional career playing basketball. And then one summer I stopped growing, everyone else kept growing, and then realized, like, oh, if I'm not the tallest person out there, I'm not sure if I'm actually that good at this.
And how tall is your dad and mom?
My dad's right at 6 feet also. He did the exact same thing, just shot up like a weed and then stopped. And then my mom is, I don't know, about 5'9" or so. So, average height, a little bit taller than average parents, but just good, quick genes of growing, I guess.
Yeah. Sprouted up early and just kind of stopped. Got it.
All right.
So when did you first experience the idea of thru hiking? When did that come into your consciousness?
Yeah. Good question. So I got really into backpacking in maybe the second half of high school, about the time I was 16 or so. The summer camp that I was going to, we'd take some trips off site. And so we went to a place in Georgia. I can't remember exactly where it was. Actually, no, there's one spot. But then the main place, we'd always stay at Vogel State Park. It's just right across from Neal Gap there at the start of the AT. And so we went out, and that's where I learned about the AT, was through the summer camp that I'd grown up going to, was what I kind of connected the pieces that way. Mm-hmm. And so found out that, like, saw Neal Gap and saw, like, all the boots that are hanging there and the tree, and that people hike for really long distances. Man, that's really cool. That's crazy. People did that, or used to do that. I didn't even really know that people still did that was a thing that was going on. So that kind of planted the seed of, like, oh man, it would be cool to live out of a backpack for a little bit. And so I started collecting the gear over a couple of Christmases in high school. And then finally, by the time I graduated high school, I was ready to go out for a little bit. And so my dad planned a trip for the two of us, and neither of us had been backpacking, but he got all the maps and did all that, and borrowed a backpack from one of his friends at work, and got all the gear together and packed up. And, you know, as first time backpackers do, we had 40, 50 pounds each on our backs going out there. And he picked a section of the AT to do that was Fontana Dam up to Clingman's Dome. So it's just over 30 miles, and we were going to do it over a few days. And I thought, like, man, hiking like 10 miles a day, that really doesn't seem like all that much if that's all you're doing is walking. We should be able to do that easy and have plenty of time. But man, with heavy packs, and I was really not in great shape by the end of high school, and it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I mean, even to this day, just, you know, once like experiencing it for the first time, it just kind of changes where your threshold is. Once you've done it some, and know what your limits are, what is the most difficult changes. And so to this day, that was still one of the most difficult things I've done, even though it was just 30 miles. I mean, you know, I've hiked single days that are that long now, but at the time that was just like, oh, I can't, like, it was so difficult, and I was getting frustrated. Like, I invested and I thought backpacking was going to be so much fun, and I don't know if I'm ever going to want to do this again. And just got real beat up about it. But I mean, obviously not too much. You know, I kept it around and decided maybe if I tinker with some things, I can make my weight lower, and I'll just go a little bit slower and all this other stuff. So that was the first trip, and, you know, planted the seed. And then from then on, the dreams only grew and it became more tangible. And now we are where we are.
Yeah, Prof, I believe you have just described the same first experience that all multi-day backpackers have. You know, they have that first experience out there, and they wonder themselves leading up to the trip, hey, all you're doing is just walking. I mean, that's all you're doing, you're just walking. How hard could it be? You know, we should be able to do 10 miles a day. I remember having these same exact thoughts, and so that's why this is so funny to me. Because I imagine that there are a lot of folks out there that have had these same internal conversations or conversations with their hiking buddies. Hey, we're just walking, we can do this. And then they get out there and they think, oh my gosh, what have I gotten myself into?
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So what do you do to pay the bills right now?
Yeah, so I've kind of jumped around, done a few things since college. But currently I found myself working at just a local outdoor store. So I'm a manager at Alabama Outdoors here in Birmingham, Alabama.
Very good. You get a discount?
Yeah, I get a discount. I got pro deals. I have not paid full price for a piece of backpacking gear in a hot minute now, and it feels good.
Nice. We talked to a lot of people who they got involved in backpacking, and the first thing they do is they go to an REI like store and dump a ton of money. And so I think REI has been the biggest benefactor of the you know, the resurgence or the increase in thru hiking across the country since Wild came out. And I think they have raked in a lot of money. But you have done it the right way, my friend. You have gotten yourself a job at one of those stores, not REI, but REI like, and taking advantage of that discount. Well done.
Yeah. I knew after the AT, this is going to be something I wanted to keep doing for a while. And so I thought, man, if I'm going to be doing this and investing more, I better just do something that connects me to some part of it, and gets it so I can stay involved and keep getting gear. Because, man, I just love collecting backpacking gear. So it worked out well for me.
Very good. Now, in the intro, I alluded to your college degree in wilderness leadership and experiential education. Tell us about that. What college was it? And you were a double major. That was just one of your two majors.
Yeah, right. So I double majored in that and music. I've played saxophone since I was about 10 years old. And after high school, the two things that I really enjoyed doing were being outdoors, and at that time it was really more even just wanting to be more involved with summer camps, not even as much the backpacking and other outdoor sports. But then it also had pretty good success playing saxophone, and thought, well, I'll keep following this and see what comes of it. And so I toured a bunch of schools all over the Southeast. And then through a friend that I'd met at the camp I grew up going to that had just started going to this college, it's called Brevard College in Brevard, North Carolina. Tiny little school. They've grown since I was there. By the time I graduated, there were 700 total students. So just a little bitty college that's there, just outside of Asheville, North Carolina. So it's actually right there at Pisgah is kind of the little outdoor area that's right there, and it's the land of the waterfalls. There's all kinds of great hiking. It's one of the, I've seen it published as one of the top 10 mountain biking destinations in the country. It's just kind of a little gym that's over there in Western North Carolina, and it's just a really pretty chunk of country, and I found this really cool major, and so got to play outside and play music for college, and it was a good time. I learned a lot and got a good, I guess, professional sort of outdoor education, and got to learn how to do a lot of things the most ideal ways to do them, as far as leave no trace practices and all those other sorts of things.
Okay, before we get into the details of your major and what you learned, I have to ask, is there an ultralight saxophone out there that you carry on your backpacking trips?
No, there is not. I've seen some that have been made. They're still not all that light. I've played around and found some lightweight instruments though that are pretty cool that I can tinker around with. But I think what I've discovered is that there aren't too many people that really want to hear that when you're going out. And so I thought at first when I was looking at the AT, like, oh, it'd be great to bring an instrument along, and then saw like, I'm going to be surrounded by people. I don't think anybody wants to hear that at camp at the end of the day. I think I better just leave that at home.
Oh, I had this great image in my mind of Prof carrying around his saxophone on the AT and then serenading his fellow campers out there in the huts along the trail.
Yeah, that would be a trip. I have my fingers crossed I'd find one in a hostel someday, but to this day still have not come across one.
You're looking for that random saxophone in one of the huts, huh?
Yeah, right.
All right. Hey, tell us about the major. So what did you learn as part of the wilderness leadership and experiential education? I know you mentioned leave no trace. What other types of items? Other types of concepts?
Yeah, it was great for people interested in this kind of podcast, especially. Like, it's just kind of a dream major, really. Is there were a bunch of hands-on classes, and so you take the basic class. So it's wilderness leadership and experiential education, but we smashed all those letters together. We like a good abbreviation and just called it Willie for short. So it's just called the Willie major. So the first class you take is just Willie 101. And so you're going out, you do a little bit of everything. You got like a 4-day lab where you go out and paddle one day, rock climb one day. There's a little backpacking trip that's part of it, a little weekend trip. And it's a small school, so all these classes are no bigger than 10 people tops. So you're in small, intimate groups with people. The professors are, love the outdoors and love teaching. And so it's great people that I was involved with and got to learn from the whole time that I was there. But you take a number of, those courses and then some lab courses, I say in quotes. So like backpacking 101, rock climbing 101, where, you meet like once a week in 1 4-hour shift and go out and learn, and then go on one weekend trip. And then kind of the climax of the major is, it's called the Immersion Semester. And it's a group of up to 10 students and one professor. And the whole semester you're doing longer units. So like 2 weeks of paddling, different bodies of water and different types of boats, a week of climbing, a number of backpacking trips. We got some certifications in there. So I got certified as a Leave No Trace Master Educator through the program, as well as a Wilderness First Responder, which I've been able to keep up both of those, and those feel like they've been really handy to have as I've done all the thru hiking stuff. But you're doing that stuff, and then you also have classroom days where you and the other students are planning, and you've got certain parameters you're working within, but you're planning a 21-day expedition that you're going to lead with a professor that's going to be there to just make sure that you don't kill yourselves out there. But for the most part, students are leaders, and they let you make mistakes. And if you pick the wrong trail, the professors don't correct you, and you just got to figure that out on your own. So it was a great environment to learn some of this stuff in that really set me up well to thru hike ultimately. And so the trip that we planned, it was 4 days of paddling the French Broad River, a couple days caving, and then 15 days of backpacking.
Wow. That sounds like an incredible college major. I mean, I would look forward to going to school every day if that was my major.
Yeah, like I said, it's just like, man, I'm just lucky to have found this place, and it was such a great experience, and just really naturally led right into thru hiking. I mean, I was set up so well for it by the time I came around to it.
So let me ask you a question that I know that's out there on everybody's mind. Other than preparing you to be a fantastic thru hiker, what else can you do with this degree? What are the
Yeah.
career options?
Right. So that gets more into kind of the experiential education side of things. So there's also a lot of talk about teaching and facilitating. A lot of people have gone on to be different types of guides or work in like wilderness therapy, or even just to be educators in some capacity, to work, like in a Montessori school type setting, or something like that. So it's for, folks that are serious about wanting to do something in the field, and that are determined to find a route to it. And so, yes, people are going out being guides, working and living all over the country, doing cool jobs.
Very good. Now you mentioned 4 days of paddling, 15 days of backpacking. Tell me about the caving. What's involved in caving?
Oh yeah, sure. So we found a cave. I think someone in my group maybe had a connection to, but we went, and there's a little campground outside the cave. So we camped out outside of it. And then the professor was familiar with it. And so he took us on a tour of the cave and showed us kind of how to guide it the first day, and took us through it. And so he gave us the maps and showed us all that and everything. And so then we came back out, spent the night outside the cave, and then went back in, and then, just gave us the reins and kind of told us, like, you guys take some turns guiding, and kind of see what that would be like with you're in the lead now that you've seen the route once, and just to get a feel for what that might be like.
Okay. And is there any guiding in your future as a career?
I'm not sure. I think there certainly could be. I've done a little bit already. After I graduated college, I moved to Washington State to live and work at a camp there. And so I'd actually gone there one summer in college already. And so I had some connections there. And then after I graduated college, I was actually set to go to grad school. I was going to go to Colorado University at Boulder for music education right after I graduated college. And I was applying to work at some camp in Colorado to make some new connections there. And so I reached out to my boss that I had at the camp in Washington to be a reference. And she said, well, yeah, I'd be happy to be a reference, but I would rather you came back up here and led our offsite adventure program for the summer. And so I said, yeah, I think I'm gonna follow that, and school can wait a little bit. So I went to Washington and then ended up doing that for a summer. And so led some trips. It's it's mostly a stay in camp, I guess you'd say. But I got to go off site and lead different trips. So do some climbing stuff, do some paddling stuff. There was a really experienced guy that was there that had been doing the program forever that would still do one trip out of the summer. That was the Mountaineering Trips. So I got to do a little bit of mountaineering while I was up there. And so there was one guy that kind of knew the route and would guide that. And then I kind of helped out with one other person to help just guide the people and lead everybody along, and, manage the gear, cook the food, all that kind of stuff. So I got to do really kind of some secondhand guiding, but still getting to be part of the process. And that was a lot of fun.
Okay. Well, some favorite memories from the Pacific Northwest?
Yeah, the snow there was just unreal. I mean, growing up in the Southeast, I hadn't seen anything like it. And so, especially living at this camp, I was 45 minutes from the nearest grocery store. And so, I'd park in the parking lot, and then I just kept a sled in my car and would have to drag all my groceries back up to my house at the end of the day whenever I'd go out to reload. So that was pretty wild. Friday nights, I was sitting out by a barrel fire with a walkie-talkie. We didn't have phones there. So I'd get a call on the walkie-talkie when a guest group was getting close, and I sat out there in a bulldozer that pulled a giant sled, and I'd help people load up and then drive this bulldozer around the camp, drop people off at the cabins. I'd be on call 24/7. So that usually meant, like, on weekends when groups were in the winter, I'd get a call at 11 o'clock. Hey, we can't start a fire. Could you come over here and help us out a little bit? So I was on call to go start fires, which, got a little bit, I don't quite want to say annoying, but, had its moments. But looking back on it, it's very that was a cool job I got to do while I was there.
Prof, if it was annoying, you can say it's annoying. You're allowed to speak freely here on the podcast. It's just you and me. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, at the time, maybe a little bit. Looking back on it, no, it was great.
Okay, very good. So how long was it? Just a summer job?
It was a summer job. It turned into a year-long internship. It turned into being the full-time program director. So I ended up being there about years.
All right. Very good. Hey, we are going to take a quick break. When we come back from the break, we're going to hear from the prof about his AT hike in 2018 and his PCT hike in 2019. Stay tuned for that. We'll be right back. And welcome back. We're talking to Prof about his experiences out on the trail. We heard about his background and growing up and his outstanding Willie major at Brevard College. And now we're going to get into the nitty gritty of some of his long hikes. So you took on the AT in 2018. This is your first long trail experience, right?
Yeah, that's the one.
Okay. And when you went into the AT, it's 2,200 miles, Georgia to Maine. Did you go northbound or southbound?
I went north.
Northbound. Okay. And how were you feeling? What was your confidence level? I mean, you are a Willie major after all. What's your confidence level going into the AT?
Yeah, I think I was in a good place for it. I think I had a healthy amount of confidence. I was not positive at all. I mean, I knew the numbers, and I took that into account for sure. But I knew, like, especially doing the research, realizing that, like, a lot of people are coming into this without very much experience, and a lot of them can make it, and do make it every year. And I think I've got the drive for this. I think that's a really important part. I think I'm okay with taking care of myself. I was a little bit worried that I might get some kind of overuse injury from just kind of not knowing when to stop. But I felt like I had a pretty good amount of knowledge. And then I had just been fortunate to know a lot of folks and have met a lot of folks that either that live along the AT. And so reaching out on, posting on social media, like, hey, I'm going to do this thing. So many people all the way up the trail reached out and said, hey, when you get to this part of the trail, let me know, I'll come help you out. And so I felt like I had, especially the first half of the trail, I knew a lot of folks. I felt like I was going to have training wheels for the first while, that I would always be within a couple hours drive of somebody that I knew if something really went wrong. And so I felt pretty safe because of that. I felt relatively comfortable with my experiences having been outside. And then I did a lot of research going into the trail. I watched a lot of YouTube videos, learned a lot about gear, and kind of had a pretty good idea of what the most common gear setup was. And so I had a pretty good base weight going into the AT too, which felt good.
And was that in the 9 to 12 pound range?
Yeah, it was right around 12 pounds starting the AT.
Okay. So I think the stats are that a quarter of the people who start the AT finish the AT. So one in four. And I think I would think that, if I were you, I would say to myself, well, 1 in 4, I'm going to be one of those 1 in 4 just because of my background knowledge about the subject. Heck, I've got a major in it. Yeah.
So like I said, I felt pretty decent about it, but also as far as everything that was in my control. But I think one of the biggest things that takes people off is definitely things that are out of their control. I mean, there's plenty of people that just don't have the experience or didn't quite save up well enough or have, even if it's not that they run out of money from other financial issues coming up. But just plenty of like injuries happening, or I think one of the biggest things I was worried about was not even myself. I'm a really cautious hiker. I hike pretty carefully. I was worried about something at home happening, like a family member getting hurt or hospitalized or something like that, and feeling the need to get off trail or having to make the decision to get off trail to be supportive. And so that just the things that were out of my control, I was still definitely very cognizant of and a little bit scared of all the way up until I was climbing down Katahdin.
That's right. It only takes one misstep, one little accident that's outside of your control, and now you're injured and you can't go any further. And
yeah, exactly.
I was talking to Jeff Garmeyer, who goes by Legend. He did the calendar triple crown, where he did all 3 long trails in one calendar year. And I just remarked to him that, not only do you have to be, a super endurance athlete to kind of do that task, but you also have to be very lucky because, that's thousands upon thousands of miles, and it just takes one wrong step or, one accident to take you off the trail. So good point.
Yeah. I definitely think luck is an important part of all successful thru hikes.
Okay.
Or at least a lack of bad luck.
That's right. Lack of bad luck. Don't necessarily need good luck, just no bad luck. Okay. And so did the AT go as expected for you? Were there any surprises on the trail?
Oh, plenty. Yeah. I mean, I was still, I think I had a decent idea of what it was going to be like. But even having a decent idea of what it was going to be like, just relative to most people, I still had kind of no idea what to expect or what it's actually going to like feel like, just emotionally and physically, and all that stuff while you're out there. I was still nervous of whether or not I'd actually make friends and have people to hike with, setting out alone. That got taken care of pretty early on. I mean, starting in the popular season on the AT, there's so many people. Surely there's going to be someone you end up hiking with. And then I was, a lot of people reached out and said, "Hey, I'll see you when you're on the trail." And like, I said like, "Yeah, thanks. That'd be great." But then kind of thought like, we'll see. Like, I know my schedule is going to be kind of busy and it's tough to line up with people, but man, so many people did come out and helped to be part of my thru hike in some capacity. And that was great. Like it was, especially having lived in the Pacific Northwest for a while, that coming home was a little bit like a homecoming of coming back and hiking through the Southeast, especially like getting started, of seeing like college friends I hadn't seen in a long time. Even high school friends that were still kind of in the area, just seeing lots of people that I had made some kind of connection with at some point in my life, and getting to go out there and reconnect with them during that really meaningful journey for me. I was hopeful that would happen, but I was very pleasantly surprised by the numbers in which people came out to see me. It was great. I felt just so supported.
And so you started out solo. Did you pick up a tramily?
I did. Yeah. I was hiking with somebody by the end of the second day that I was out there. And was with people for the most part, and kind of the trend of my hikes. I mostly hike with the same people, except for a couple of folks getting off trail, all pre-planned for the most part. I just had some kind of good luck of like the people that I was hiking with ended up being people that ended up going the whole way. So I hiked with one girl that's one of my best hiking friends, Big Money. I hiked half the AT with, and she had done the northern half the year before, so she was finishing her flip-flop. And finished within a year, and so still got to be a thru hiker, which is great. And then I ended up hiking half the PCT with her as well. So like met people early on that I'd go on to hike thousands more miles with. But the trick was I'd be with people for a while.
Did you say her name was Big Money?
Yeah, Big Money.
Big Money, okay.
Yeah, she's great. She's setting out to hike the CDT this year and finish up her Triple Crown. So she's one to look out for. She's great.
Okay.
But so I'd hike with people for a while, and I loved that. But then I would, I spent time with friends and family, so I'd get off trail for some stretches of time. And I liked playing catch up and being by myself, and hiking fast and seeing what my limits are when I'm by myself, and then catching back up to friends and being with my family for a while. And then doing something else, getting off trail or shooting ahead of trail because I knew I was going to take time off. So I like kind of juggling back and forth between hiking with people that I really liked, and then taking little breaks in there to just have some solo time. It's just a different ballgame hiking with people versus hiking by yourself. Even not physically hiking with people during the day, but just planning out everything together and then getting to make your own plans entirely is just different. And then also just the social dynamic is totally different, of meeting people when you're part of a group, and that's kind of part of your identity, versus meeting people as this new persona and this new name that you have created for yourself. And like, I wonder who Professor is going to be today when I meet somebody, and just kind of learning a lot about myself through the times that I was alone, and whenever I'd meet somebody and see just who I was going to be that day. And I tended to, while I was out there, I really liked who I'd found out that I was in those situations.
Right. Now, what were the dates of your hike? When did you start? When did you finish? What was the duration?
Yeah, so I set out for the AT on April 22nd, and I finished on August 31st. And so I felt like that was a really, really nice gap. It was maybe a hair on the quicker side, but I started past the snow and most of the cold. I sent my down jacket home after the first week and never got it back again. And then finishing August 31st in Maine, it was starting to get chilly. My coldest experience on trail was probably my last morning, waking up and doing Katahdin early. But that's just the one morning. So everywhere in between there, it was somewhere between hot and then comfortably cool. It was a really good window.
So April 22nd to August 31st, that's a little over 4 months.
Yep. Yeah. 132 days.
That's a pretty good clip.
It was good. It felt good. It was a good balance of getting to move fast sometimes, moving slow sometimes, taking plenty of 0 days. It was a good mix. It worked out well.
How many zeros did you take?
I think I ended up taking 16 0 days across the course of the trail.
And I don't know, is that typical? Is that a typical number of zeros for the AT?
I feel like it is. I feel like that's probably fairly average. Yeah, as far as I can tell, I think that's probably on the average side.
All right, we're going to go with average on that. Okay.
Okay.
And for our listeners who may not be familiar with the long trails and the hiking and the all the terms that come with it, tell us, what is a 0 day and what do you do during a 0 day? What was the majority of your time taken up doing during those 16 0 days?
Yeah. So 0 day, it's when you hike 0 miles on the trail. So you got your 0 days, you got your Nero days where you hike nearly 0 miles, but still get to do a few in. And then my favorite that I found out kind of later in hiking is a hero day, which is a day where you hike into town, you do everything you need to do in town, and then you still hike back out. And so you get to have a town day, but you're a hero because you don't get sucked into town. So the things you do in town are resupplying, and you just got your through hiking chores. So you got to do your laundry. You might want to take a shower. You're probably going to want to eat a meal out somewhere. You're definitely going to resupply. You might switch your gear up, make some phone calls while you're in service, post on social media, all those sorts of things that you need to do when you've got cell phone service and you've got all the resources there and that are available.
So those 16 days were all town days?
Yes. Yeah. I didn't take any 0 days on the trail on the AT. It was all spent in town or with a friend that was nearby. But no hiking.
Okay. And you didn't have to take any because of injury?
I actually did. I took a couple days. My longest stint I think I ended up having 3 full days off. From the worst chafing that I have had or ever seen. One of my biggest regrets on trail is not taking a picture of it. I had really terrible chafing from not showering and having like wet, salty shorts, and hiking in the rain for a long stretch of time. So I'd been over a week without a shower, and I was hiking in to see a friend. And this was a friend that was an acquaintance in that they were a staff member at the summer camp I grew up going to when I was a camper, and we had become Facebook friends. And that was 10 years ago. And I posted on Facebook that I'm doing this thing. And then she said, "Hey, when you get to Vermont, my husband and I will pick you up and you can stay with us in our apartment." I said, "Oh, that'd be great. Sure." So I was trying to book it to see her because I'd made that appointment. And I was in bad shape when I woke up that morning. I mean, it had been a rough couple days. But I got up and just hiked through the chafe, and it occurred in my shorts where the lining met, and it just had this perfect kind of spot on it that rubbed my leg just right on both my inner thighs. And I'm hiking in women's running shorts, so quite short, so quite high up the thigh. And so I'm hiking, and it just rubbed my legs just so raw. I did 26 miles of just pure chafing, and finally got to the Vermont New Hampshire border is where I finished up there at Dartmouth, and there was skin inside of my shorts that had come off and that was stuck in the lining, and so it was so bad I couldn't walk for a couple of days. So I went up and I stayed in their apartment, and I just kind of laid back for a few days and relaxed. And then I went to the nearest thrift store and bought a pair of basketball shorts that were a few sizes too large, and then just hiked in that for the next week while I was on trail, while I was letting my skin heal up a little bit. So that was only injury. And that wasn't, that's kind of like my own arrogance sort of injury. That wasn't like I twisted my ankle or anything like that. That was like, I'm going to power through this because I want to go see this person and get off trail. And I did, and I paid for it with a couple of days.
Yeah, chafe danger is real. It's a real thing.
Yeah. And that was the only time I really had it, though. It was just that one time that I let my shorts get too wet and too salty for too long.
And you're lucky it was inner thigh. We had IB Tat on on the show a few episodes back, and he shared a really unfortunate chafe story that I wince at now just thinking about it.
Oof.
So yeah, yikes. All right, and so no feet injuries, no big blisters or skin sloughing off your heel. We've heard of those incidents as well too.
Yeah, no, I was pretty fortunate. It was my first time really in trail runners. I'd done boots before, and so I got a couple of learning blisters as I was learning those, and as my feet were learning those. But then after the first few weeks, my feet were really fine for the most part. It was great.
And what are your go-to trail runners for the long hikes?
I like the ultras. I like the Lone Peaks.
Yeah,
I've done pretty much all Lone Peaks. I did Temps one time, and they were fine. I got them because I found them on sale somewhere. But I mostly stuck to Lone Peaks, and they've treated me well.
Very good. Good choice. Good choice. Now, from your time on the AT, 2,200 miles. That's a long way. Can you distill it down into 3 memorable moments?
Yes, I'm sure that I can. I would say
that's a good answer. Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Next question. So let's see. I think maybe a little bit cliche, but the day one, I've gone to the visitor center. I've gone through the chat, and I had a cousin that hiked the approach trail with me. So we did the first 8.8 miles up to the top of Springer Mountain. And then I had an uncle that met us up there and took my cousin home. And so hiked with them, and it was a rainy day in April. And then finishing up after they drove off, of like really realizing the feeling of setting out by myself and just that level of freedom and just having no obligations. I didn't have any kind of job lined up. I had nowhere that I needed to be anytime. I had just indefinite time to hike and go on this trip. Like that feeling is just something that I have been chasing ever since. It's just that level of freedom is just, oh man, it's great. It's hard to describe it without having gotten to feel it. And I got to feel it there.
So I'm interested. I wasn't sure where you were going to go with that. The moment you're alone and you've got 2,200 miles stretching in front of you. Didn't know if you were going to say freedom or just the trepidation of knowing I'm on my own. It's like a double-edged sword, right? I'm on my own.
Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's awesome. I'm on my own. Oh no. And so any feelings of doubt or worry at that point?
That I was on too much of a high at that point.
Yeah.
I didn't have much at that point. It was and I was able to stay in a pretty good headspace of just taking it one day or one little section at a time. Just like, we'll do these 3 days and get to town, and then we'll worry about the next one after that. So I just got in such a, and I have heard stories of so many other hikers experiencing the same thing, of just having such a good mental headspace of being out there on the trail, that just being able to stay positive pretty easily, that even the really terrible stuff is never really all that terrible in the moment. You usually find some way to laugh at it, especially, once you have other hikers that you're hiking with and can share that suffering with other people. It makes it a little bit easier. But in the beginning, it was just, I just remember so much joy and excitement of being out there and making progress, even the little bits that it was. But that was, I only remember positive feelings from that.
Okay, very good. That's one moment. How about 2 others?
Yeah. And then another moment was some of the best trail magic that I experienced, which was in Virginia at the start of the Shenandoahs. I should know this. I want to say it's Waynesboro, the town that you go into there. And we just stayed at a little hotel there. It was the bottom was about to drop out. And I was hiking in a group of 10 at that point. And half of us had made it to the hotel and half of us were still back. When we went to check in, and they were really friendly at the hotel, and like gave us a business suite. So we'd have extra beds and encouraged us to all like pile in there together. Usually I'll say as a disclaimer, it's not cool to do that most of the time, but these folks were all about it. And, I would say encouraged it for us. So they were just maybe too friendly about that, but they wanted us to do that. And then the guy, we said we were hikers, we were in town, we needed to resupply, asked him where stuff was. He said, it's a little bit of a walk from here to be able to get to the grocery store. I don't usually do this, but here are the keys to my truck. And you guys can take the truck and drive it around town and get everywhere that you need to go. And we thought he was joking. We just laughed at him. And he said, no, please do. I don't get off work until 6 o'clock. Just have it back by then. Don't put gas in it or anything. I just want you guys to be able to get around town. I love you guys are thru hikers. So here's the keys to my truck. Like he met us 2 minutes ago and then he was giving us his car for the day. So just, there's plenty of other examples of people being like just wildly friendly, but that guy especially just giving us his car. It's just like, I can't believe this is happening.
Wow. That is fantastic. Do you remember the name of the establishment? You want to throw it out there?
Oh man, I wish I did. I might have it written down somewhere. I took pretty detailed notes in my journals, so I can get it back to you for show notes or something.
Okay.
But that hotel and that guy, that was an awesome experience there. And then of course there's that Chinese buffet that's in that town too. That's excellent. So that was a great experience there. All right.
And number three.
I think I kind of like the reflection and having the different pieces represent different parts of the hike. So the last 2 weeks on trail were great. I had my trail crew had dwindled down. It was these 3 other girls and I had been trying to catch up to them for a little bit. I had taken my 3 days off right when I got to New Hampshire. And so I was only supposed to be a day behind and I could catch up. And I thought like, oh, New Hampshire, everyone does low miles in New Hampshire. That'll be a great place to catch up to people. Well, there's a reason people do low miles in New Hampshire. And so I spent all of New Hampshire by myself and I had a great time by myself. Some of my best experience were when I was alone, but catching up to the crew just past the 2,000 mile marker in Maine, I met them up with them in town. We had a hotel room together. We took our last 0 day together. And then knowing that like, this is it, this is the crew that we're going to finish with. Everything seems to be pointing to, we can do it. We got 2 weeks left. Let's make the best of it. And so we had this group that I had met 2 of them as early as the first week or first 2 weeks and had just kind of bounced around with them. And we'd finally been mostly hiking together for most of before New Hampshire, about 600 or 700 miles at least. And so got up to them and then our other friend that we had made along the way too. And so then the 4 of us, so it was Peaches and Jukebox, who afterwards started dating after the trail, and I got to be there for their engagement this last fall. And so that was a really cool moment that happened with them. I got to be there for kind of them getting to know each other before they were even dating or anything. That was great. And then our friend Prof, who had hiked the PCT a couple times and the TA a couple times. So she was a seasoned thru hiker, and got to finish with the 3 of them. And just those last 2 weeks were just a blast with like good people that I'd known and retelling all of our stories from different parts of the trail. And still, even at that point, telling a story about someone. And then one of us realized like, oh, I met them here. And then just kind of putting together all the pieces. So it was a really nice finish to the hike of getting to reflect and spend really good time with friends at the end and having fine weather. Our Katahdin day was perfectly clear at the top. So we had a perfect summit day. It just all ended as well as I could have possibly written it up. It was great.
Very good. Now you mentioned a trail name in there that I had only heard one time before, and it's because it's my son's trail name, Jukebox. So
okay, cool.
There are multiple jukeboxes out there. Very good.
There are, yeah. I think we even ran into a couple more while we were out there. I think there were 2 or 3 that were out there that summer. Very good.
And now when you were finishing up the AT, did you know at that point that you were going to do the PCT the following year?
Yeah.
You had made that decision?
I had made that decision. And then Jukebox and Peaches had also agreed to come along too. And then Big Money also. So we knew we had a little crew that we were pulling together to like, I'm serious about this. Are you serious about this? I'm really going to do it. You can come too. I'm going to do it. So we had kind of talked a little bit and pulled our thoughts together and had decided. So I wasn't even alone in wanting to do this. I still had a trail family that wanted the second chapter. So that made it all the more exciting.
Okay, that was going to be my segue between the AT and the PCT, because you said when you started out on the AT that you felt the support, you had family and friends within, at most a couple of hours from the trail. But going to the PCT, there are a lot of parts of that trail that are inaccessible. You could be, to hike out could be a 1 or 2 day, full bore hike to get to the next town. It's pretty remote in places. And so I wanted to talk to you about how you dealt with that, but it sounds like you brought some of your trail family with you.
Yeah. So that was great. That worked out. It just couldn't have gone much better. Cause I really didn't know very many people along the PCT. I made friends with people that kind of had some connections, and that was helpful. And I knew that I'd made some good connections in Washington. So once I went north on the PCT, so I knew that when I was going to get to the finish line, that as kind of a celebration, that once I'd made it that far, even just to the border, there were people that I would be able to call if I needed. But once I got there, that I'd be in touch with folks. So I had that to look forward to the whole way, instead of the opposite on the AT of kind of having training wheels for the first 1,000 miles and then being a little bit looser with it.
Good point. Good point. And so what were the dates of your PCT hike in 2019?
Yeah. So I started the PCT on May 4th and I finished on October 7th. So just over a month for that one. Or 5 months. 5 months. 5
months. Yeah, it's a little longer than a month. Yeah, just over
over a month. Yeah.
So 2,600 miles, 5 months. What does that work out to be your daily average there?
I should have had it pulled up. So one of my things I do on the trails, I am a diligent note and statistic taker of everything. You
struck me as a statistics guy. So
yeah, so I've written up both after the AT and the PCT. I've got articles that I've written up where I kept track of every single thing that I could count during a day. Like obviously my miles. I had a Fitbit, so I had my step count. And so I ran the data on that. So I had like how many like steps it took to hike a mile in each state on the AT, and then same broken down by section on the PCT. And then like how many times I would pee during a day and how many liters of water I drank. So I could like track my water consumption and how efficient I was with water conversion throughout each of the different sections, like how many beers that I drank in each section and how many of those were free versus how many I paid for. So I've got all my statistics written out. It's a couple of fun little articles. Yeah.
Yeah. Prof, where can we find these? Tell me these are online somewhere.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I published both of these on the Trek.
Okay. Very good. I was going to ask you about you being a writer for the Trek. So we can look that up. We can look up Carl Stanfield or Prof under the Trek and find those articles.
Yep. Yeah. Just PCT numbers or AT numbers, and both of those should pop up.
Fantastic. And what was the highest daily total for a number of Ps?
Oh yeah. Somewhere in the low teens. I think I maybe hit 14 one time.
Woo! That's running a lot of water through that body. Very good.
That's a lot of water. Yep.
What was your high mileage on the PCT? Did you do the Oregon Challenge?
I wanted to, but I got Giardia in Oregon, so I'll get to that. But my high mileage I did in Northern California. I'd set out. I'd heard of people trying to do something like 80 miles in 24 hours, and I thought, oh man, that's intense. I wonder if I could do that, because I liked pushing it. One of my favorite things. I love being with a group and taking our time and enjoying towns. I love doing that. I took a lot more zeros on the PCT because of the group that I was hiking with. I took a lot of zeros, spent a lot of time partying in town, but then I liked being by myself and playing catch up and really hoofing it. So I set out at midnight, just after the halfway point on the PCT. So just after Chester, and then hiked through, I think Lassen is what's right after that. But I started at midnight and then hiked until about 10:30 that night. And I put in 63 miles in a day. And so that was my capstone. Like, I wonder how many miles I can do in 24 hours. And that's the number I came to.
Impressive. What was the most difficult section of the PCT?
Yeah, I think it's gotta be the Sierra. It was 2019. I'm sure you've heard from other folks that have hiked it that year. That was a really high snow year. Mm-hmm. And I went in not even early. We started the tail end of June. And so I know there's folks that started as early as mid to late May in the snow that year and still made it through. And that's awesome. More power to them. We kind of, starting May 4th, I'd heard ahead of time it was going to be a high snow year. And so I tried to get a later date for us for our permit. And also with trying to get permits for 4 people on the same day, kind of a little bit of a later start date was easier to coordinate. And so the snow was tricky, and we had our group. So it was the 4 of us, and that group that I went out with, and it actually changed. It wasn't the same 4 that I started with. but the four of us hiking through and spending all day, every day together. It was physically tough. And then the group dynamics got tough too, of just balancing everybody's mental health with the difficulty of that. And there were some sketchy sections of coming down, especially coming down Glen Pass was one of the most mentally exhausting, of just being kind of, a little bit freaked out being on snow and coming down something steep that, we're just really not too sure about. That was tough. So the Sierra it was beautiful. It was fantastic. It was also one of my favorite sections for sure. But it was tough, just balancing everybody's emotions through all that of the fear and the desires and how fast we should try to do this and all that kind of stuff. What was especially difficult, but then just the snow hiking and just the mental toll of post holing and being exhausted to go, 15 to 20 miles after having cruised 25 to 30 miles. It's tough.
Yeah. Post holing is not fun.
It is not.
And other than the Giardia, which we're going to hear about, any close calls in the Sierras?
No, nothing too bad. The river crossings were actually relatively tame. They were okay at that point. We just kind of hit a good balance of it. Glen Pass was a little bit sketchy of coming down it, not being too sure exactly which way to go, having to use my ice axe a little bit. And the rest of my group members also, we got to the point where we were just kind of turning around and facing the snow and digging fists and feet in to kind of climb down like a ladder. It took a long time to climb down. But it was, that was a pretty mentally exhausting bit. And then coming towards the end of it, it was kind of nice because at the start we were hearing from the JMT hikers that were going south. Their news was good and reliable. And hey, this pass is going to be sketchy. This is tough. But kind of going north, you do some of the tougher stuff first, and it gets easier from there. So having done the tougher stuff, they've just started out. And hey, this pass is about to be really tricky for you guys. And we said, okay, this next one's going to be tricky for you. And then we get to that one and like, ooh, if they saw this one was tricky, then this next one that they're coming up on going south is going to be really tough. But for the most part, we had the one pass that was tricky. The river crossings were okay. And we just kind of took our time, especially after the first couple of days, and said, hey, we just need to stay together as a group. This is kind of sketchy. This is kind of scary. I feel like we can do this together, but we need to take this seriously. And we did, and we had a good time.
Yeah, it's always a huge benefit to encounter hikers coming the opposite direction, because you have that you have that exchange of information and trail conditions and crossings and everything else. So that's always very helpful. Now, no problems with Evolution Creek or Bear Creek, the crossing of those? No,
they were all right. I want to say one of them was, I only got waist deep, I think, one time. I think we just got lucky of hitting it at a good time where the snow melt wasn't too extreme, but it was low enough that the snow wasn't all that bad. Just taking our time, picking our routes, and then kind of spotting each other. It all felt all right.
Yeah. And you mentioned something about the mental health of the four of you. What kinds of issues were you guys dealing with out there? I mean, was it just the post holing and just, being frustrated at the pace, or were there other things going on?
Sure. Yeah, that was definitely part of it. Just anxiety, and just like we, the four of us, we were together all day, every day for like the first 84 days straight on the trail, which is just a long time to spend with anybody. And so I had my four that I started out with, and then we met four other people on day one, and then we were a group of 8 for a while, and that dwindled down to 4. And then it was the four of us all day, every day, hiking apart, but still usually eating lunch together, always camped out together. So we were really close, but we also just like in high tension like that, just, being tired and frustrated with yourself, and then, looking around and dealing with other people, and maybe just want to be by yourself. You have to be with other people. It's just like the necessary kind of storming phase of the group dynamics. That's just part of what happens. But it came at a physically tough time as well.
Yeah, there's no hiding on the trail. You're with each other 24/7, basically, in high stress situations, and it's going to get raw sometimes.
Yep, it absolutely is, and will, and did.
Like your inner thighs on the AT. It's going to get raw.
Same thing.
Very good. Tell us about the Giardia. How'd that happen?
Yeah, well, I had instilled a false sense of confidence from drinking water in the Sierra, of drinking all this delicious water above 10,000 feet and not filtering and not getting sick from that, and thinking like, oh, this is great. I should do this more often. So then Oregon was a section of trail where I had been by myself in Northern California to catch up, and then I did catch up, but we were still trying to push. So then I caught one of my friends, and we were trying to catch up to some of the rest of our trail family. And so within that, we were pushing higher mile days, and I just got lazy and like, oh, I'm above 8,000 feet. That feels pretty high. I can probably just drink out of this water source. I should be fine. So I filtered 100% of the AT. I filtered all of the PCT until the Sierra, and then didn't filter above 10,000 feet and had no issues with that. But then in Oregon, I just got a little bit too cocky with the water, and I paid for it. But it came at the best time possible, in that I caught up to one of my good friends, Hot Take, who I met on the trail at the beginning. We hiked most of the trail together, and I caught up to him. We were hiking together, and he had a friend who she and her boyfriend met on trail on the PCT, and they had inspired him to hike, and they live in Bend, Oregon. And so we went to stay with them, had a great time with them. I had a friend that I didn't even know lived in Bend until the day before. They texted me and said, hey, how's the PCT going? And then they said they moved to Bend, so I got to see them that night. And so anyway, so I stayed with, I can't remember their trail names. We called them by their actual names when we were there. It was Abby and Danny. We stayed with the two of them, got back on trail. And then I started feeling sick 5 or 6 days later. I was camped at the base of the hike up to Timberline Lodge. There's a little parking lot that's there with an outhouse. And so I set up my tent next to that kind of late at night. Timberline Lodge is famous for being like probably the best meal on the whole PCT. And I was a reasonable hike away from it in the morning. So I was going to be able to wake up and hike there and have this great breakfast buffet, but I just was miserable that night. I never threw up, but I just had the worst diarrhea, camped next to an outhouse. So again, I was in a great place for it, and I had cell phone service. So I didn't know what was going on. I got the norovirus on the AT, but that was gone within 24 hours. So this felt kind of like that. And so I thought, well, I'm just going to take an on-trail zero. I'll lay here. I'll sleep it off. I'll get up, and I'll keep going the next morning. And it did not get better. And I was just like totally emptied my body of fluids in this outhouse, and was just not feeling good. So I was camped out, and I was texting, and I texted Abby, and I was fishing a little bit. And I said, hey, Abby, I'm here. I feel terrible. What are your recommendations of a place to stay that's near here? Since you know the area, what could I do to get off from here? What do you think I should do? And she said, oh, well, I'll just come pick you up, and you can stay with us at our place in Bend until you feel better. And just like, oh, perfect. That's awesome. I didn't want to ask for that, but I'm so glad she offered that. So I ended up staying with them. I think it was either 5 or 6 zeros, recovering from it while I was back there. But the night that I was camped out by this outhouse, there's no water or anything nearby. And I had a little bit to get through the day, but I wasn't eating, and I was really pushing fluids. And I got so thirsty that night at 3 a.m. I reached back, and I carried contact fluid with me. And so I thought in my dehydration that like, maybe, this is saline. It's got a little bit of salt in it. I think maybe this would be something good to drink. And so I squirted a little bit in my mouth, and nope, that's not going to help this situation at all.
Hang on a sec. Hang on a sec. You're considering drinking your contact solution. Did they cover this in the Willie program? Was this a viable option? They said, hey, when in doubt, if you think you're not going to make it, just break out the contact solution. You'll be all right.
It had never come up before. It seemed logical enough at the time. I do not recommend it.
Okay. Is that a pro tip? It's too early for the pro tip. Sorry.
Yeah, that's a pre-pro tip.
Okay. Very good. And I also have to say that I can't wait to go on the Trex website and pull up your stats to check out your diarrhea stats next to the outhouse. So
yeah, have fun with that.
Were you keeping track of that as well?
I did a little bit. I did not publish that information though.
Okay.
That's not on the
list. All right. I'm going to go back to a similar concept that we talked about on the AT, top 3 moments from the PCT. Can you distill it down?
Ooh, yeah. Again, I'm sure that I can. Yes.
Okay.
So let's see. A good, I think, okay, so it's a little bit of a cop-out, but it's kind of the same moment on the PCT, but in its own PCT way of, I flew to LA and stayed with a friend there. I got to catch up with someone that lived in the area, and then she drove me down to San Diego, and I stayed with Scout and Frodo there.
Yes. Finally, yeah. I've talked to someone who stayed with Scout and Frodo. I had Scout, he was season 1, I think episode 48.
Yeah, I listened to that one. Yeah.
He came on and talked about his book, Journeys North, his 2007 PCT memoir. So he was great to talk to. What a great guy.
Yeah, just man, what a great guy. Frodo was actually not there. She was out of town for something, so I only got to meet Scout. But I've heard all these stories. Everybody talks extremely highly of him, and even so, he surpassed my expectations.
Wow. That's high praise. Very good.
Yeah, I mean, they've got 40, 50 people at their house every night, and I got there and needed Tyvek. I was going to go pick up Tyvek. I got there late enough in the day, pilled around enough, and I was meeting up with my friends here too. I hadn't seen them very much since our last thru hike, and then meeting up with everybody again for chapter 2 was exciting. Meeting Scout there, meeting all the other new hikers, all that was exciting, but I missed getting Tyvek, and I talked to Scout about it, and he said, oh, the outdoor store is going to close, but I know the guy that runs the place over there. Let me give him a quick call. He kind of lives over here. You might be able to drop some by. So me, like an experienced thru hiker, just making a dumb mistake, like, oh, I forgot to get Tyvek. The Scout goes out of his way managing all this other stuff. Frodo's not even there. He calls him up and gets him, like, pulls his whatever Scout magic that he's got, and got the guy to come by and deliver 4 pieces of Tyvek for me and all my friends that night. And just went out of his way to do that for us in the midst of everything else that was going on. And then goes and delivers, the after dinner talk that's very famous that he always does. And he gave the information and presented as if it were the first time he were telling it. I mean, you've talked to him. He's a fantastic storyteller, but he just has the energy as if it's he really does know that, like, these are all people setting out for their maybe their first thru hike or the beginning of this thru hike, and just like really instills a sense of wonder in everybody for what's going on. And so getting to not only meet this person that's such a legend, but be hosted by and have him go out of his way to do things for me and get the full treatment was just amazing. Like, what a cool start to the trail. And just the buzz about that is a totally different start than the AT, of like rolling up probably in the rain because it's the AT, being alone on Springer Mountain and just like, well, I guess this is it. I guess I'm starting here. Like, that's exciting in its own way. But the PCT, like starting at Scout and Frodo's with that whole experience of like rolling up to the monument with like 40 other people, like that's a send off. Like, that's a totally different experience to start of a trail. But man, it's something special. That was really cool. Okay.
There's number 1. How about the next 2?
Yeah, that was a great time. Let's see. I think I would say just like all of the Sierra as an experience, everything leading up to it, all of like the fear mongering, but then our like rationalization of things. Like, hey, some of us have experience and have hiked in snow before. Like, what does this actually look like? And like coming through that, and then deciding that we were going to, so all of that process, because up until the Sierra is all that you talk about on the trail.
Right.
There's other stuff that's going on, but that is what the gossip is about. That's what everybody's minds. It was nice. It helped us slow down. I took more zeros than I might have otherwise, just hanging out and like, we're in no rush to get through. We got to wait for the snow to melt. Let's just hang out here another day. So took plenty of zeros leading up to it, but just that whole thing of wrestling with it, and just that challenge that was unlike anything I'd experienced before of like, it's, we're 7 days into this, we're looking at conditions for something that's 600 miles ahead of us. And then concerned about that, and knowing it was going to be just a beautiful, fun section to hike through, and then getting there. And then it was, we had a good experience on Mount Whitney. Got to summit that with our crew, getting to be that level of alone. There were other hikers out there, other thru hikers, other JMT hikers coming south, but not very many of them. You're not seeing day hikers or anything like that. So people that are out there, even though you're not maybe don't even know very well, might know their name, but they're going through the same thing as you are. And just that micro community that's out there doing that together is really cool. When you get into town, it's a lot of fun. Like finishing the 7 or 8 day stretch that we did between resupplies to get to Mammoth, going into Mammoth and just celebrating that we made it through the longest stretch, like the longest food carry, carrying 8 days of food in a bear canister, and knowing you're not going to have cell phone service that whole time. But just so many little celebrations and difficulties and challenges, all associated with the Sierra. All of that, as difficult and frustrating as it was at times, that challenge and going through that difficulty as a trail family and as an individual was really powerful. So that was top moment for sure. Yeah, or series of moments, really.
I think that we don't have a tendency to remember the easy things. It's always the difficult stretches or the things that come right after the difficult stretches that really stand out the most.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, how about number 3?
All right, and then to top it off, again, I'm going to go to the end of the trail. We got to the end in Washington. It was late September, and I had a friend that came out to join me on the trail that I knew from when I had lived up there. And he joined me for a little bit, for a couple days. We ended up having to bail early from that section because he's an in-shape guy. He's a climber, active person. He tried to jump into 25 to 30 miles a day with me for a couple days, which you can't do.
No.
And he did great. We got through the first day just fine, got through most of the second day until about midnight. And then he just totally gave out on him. So anyway, we coordinated all this stuff. He got off trail. We had a couple other friends that were there, but that was right at the spot. That was Stevens Pass near Leavenworth, which is a 45-minute drive from the camp that I had worked at while I was there. And so I still had friends and a cousin that worked there. And they had extra cabins, and long story short, a big snowstorm ended up coming in. So it was a great time for us to have bailed off trail. And we ended up hosting 13 thru hikers, went and stayed at the camp for the whole weekend. So we had a little mini
nice
camp experience at the very end of September. They got a pretty early snow in late September like that. It was pretty heavy. They were concerned about folks that were out there. A lot of folks ended up deciding to end their thru hikes because of it. Not feeling comfortable with the snow, and there was some serious snow that was going on there, but it just lined up perfectly to where the mileage worked out. But we finished on a Friday, and then 13 of us hikers stayed at the camp, and they had plenty of leftovers at the meals. They were able to feed 13 hikers for a weekend. It just is like the dream scenario. So there were 13 of us. There were cabins for us and everything. So we just hung out for 2 days and rested up. Got on the internet, looked at supplies, went into town, got some extra warm layers, everything that we needed to for the final stretch. And then that last stretch from Stevens Pass up to the border was maybe my favorite couple weeks of backpacking, or week. I think it was a week. Yeah, my favorite week of backpacking I've ever done. Just the snow was perfect. It was a little bit difficult at times, but for the most part, it was just that perfect, fresh, frosty snow on all the mountains. So everything looked clean white snow. We were some of the first to get to travel through some of it. It didn't snow on us at all. It was just beautiful landscapes of that really nice transition, because fall was also still kind of like there were some good fall colors out mixed in with the start of the white and the snow. And it was just beautiful up in the Cascades and finishing. And we had, the 13 of us that had set out from the camp together, and we ended up splitting up, but we still, I got to finish with a bunch of my good friends that I had been hanging out with since parts of the desert even. And not the crew that I started with, but still finished with a fantastic crew. And just like some of the most beautiful, like perfect scenic weather that I've ever experienced backpacking, that felt really special to get to experience.
What an epic finish to the PCT. That sounds like an incredible trip. And I have to ask, if you knew by the time you were finishing up the AT that you were going to do the PCT, at what point did you know that you wanted to be a triple crowner? Was that just a foregone conclusion by that point?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I had started to dream about it when I was planning for the AT. just kind of looking at it and like, oh, maybe if this goes well, I'll get to plan some of these other hikes too. But I know I won't get too much into that yet.
Okay.
But then going through the AT and then knowing that like the PCT was coming up, like, oh, if I can do like feeling good on the AT, I think I'll feel good on the PCT. And then I've just got to do the CDT.
Okay. Now we're going to take another quick break. When we come back, we're going to get to, I'm going to say it, the spectacular fashion in which you plan to complete the Triple Crown, because you've got something really special in mind. So stay tuned for that. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Prof, as I alluded to in the very beginning of the episode, and again, as we went to break, you've got some pretty special plans for 2022 and getting this whole Triple Crown thing under your belt. So I know we've been making our listeners wait for the third segment here to find out what your plans are. Why don't you spring it on them? What's going on in 2022 for you?
Well, it's been a hot minute since I've gotten to do a thru hike. Some wild stuff's gone on in the world. I've had a lot of time to sit at home and to think and to plan and to scheme. And so my brain has taken me to want to put together something just as epic as I can dream of. And so next year I am attempting what I believe to be the record for the most miles traveled on foot in a calendar year. And so I am attempting to hike and backpack 11,000 miles in 2022 across the 3 Triple Crown trails and then some.
Okay, because the 3 Triple Crowns by themselves, the three Triple Crown trails add up to, what is it, about 7,700 miles?
Yeah. Depending on, which routes you take on the CDT, somewhere in there. Yeah.
That's right. And so you've got 11,000 planned, and you haven't found anywhere else someone who's done that many in a calendar year?
Yeah. So the closest that I found is just like one of the greatest adventurers and backpackers that's out there. His name's Cam Honan, or Swami, and he did the Triple Crown and then some. He did his. I don't want to mess this up, but I want to say that the 12 Great Walks, something like that he did a few years ago. That over the course of, I want to say 18 months, he hiked about 14,000 miles. But so part of that was in one calendar year, he hiked about 10,002 or 300 miles in a calendar year. And I believe that is the current record.
Okay. So take us through, what are you going to do in addition to the 7,700 miles of, well, actually I take that back, because you're not doing the, all 3 of those trails in 2022. You've got something else planned. So take us through what are the mileages and the trails that you're hiking in 2022.
Yeah. So actually my inspiration for this came, I was reading Legends book. I was reading The Free Outside,
Mm-hmm.
and studying up. And after the PCT, I was starting to kind of dream about, like, I can do a thru hike. I want to really test myself. I wonder if I could do a calendar year Triple Crown. And then I thought, well, if I'm going to try that, I may as well just shoot for everything. And so I had also heard around the same time about thru hiking the Florida Trail and seeing the time frame for that. And seeing how late that, the calendar year Triple Crown typically starts if you're going AT, PCT, CDT. They usually don't start till February or March. And at the Florida Trail, you start 1st of January. And so I also heard about the Eastern Continental Trail and connecting from Key West up into Canada. And so I think that it's possible to be able to start in Key West and hike through the Keys, hike through the Florida Trail, and pretty much hike the Eastern Continental Trail to start things off.
Hang on, Prof. For the Eastern Continental Trail, is the AT a subsection of that?
It is, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
It makes up, yeah.
Okay, so you will. I'm gonna let you go through your plans here, but you will have feet on each of the Triple Crown trails.
Yeah. So that includes the entirety of the Appalachian Trail.
Okay,
as part of it.
All right.
Yeah. So it's the going through the Keys up through the Florida Trail, some road walks in Alabama to connect up to the Pinhoti Trail. That connects to the Benton MacKaye Trail, and that connects to Springer Mountain. And then you hike the AT, and then the International Appalachian Trail goes on up into Canada But I am not going to try to do that. I'm going to finish at the border. So I think it'd be cool to hike border to border on all 3 of the Triple Crown trails. So starting at Key West, and then hike up to the Canadian border, which is not too much farther past Katahdin. And so I think I'm even only going to go, I'm shooting to go maybe just like 80 miles past it. The trail takes a hard beeline north when it gets within a mile or 2 of the border, and you just kind of follow the border for another, I don't know, a good number of miles, maybe 30, 40 more miles. But I think just to save on time, just hiking to the border and going and tagging the border is going to be good enough for what I'm hoping to do. So finish up there. And then, depending on snow level. Oh, go ahead. I
was going to say, you know, who might be a good resource for you to kind of check with and get his insight is Jupiter from the Jupiter Hikes YouTube channel.
Oh yeah. That's another one I've been following along with. I know he did the PCT a few years ago.
Right. Yeah. And also I wanted to follow up. You're going border to border. What's the southern border of Key West? What country does it border?
Well, I guess, you know, I don't know if it's.
I'm Yankee. I'm pulling your leg. Don't worry about it.
I'm calling it a border.
There you go. I'll go with that.
It's as south as you can get in the AT.
That's right.
I mean, in the U.S. That's as close as you can get for me.
Okay. All right. So you do the Eastern Continental Trail, and then where do you go from there?
Yeah, and then from there, depending on snow levels, I'm going to hike north on either the PCT or the CDT. I'd like to do the CDT first because I would like to try to do the PCT southbound to have a different experience there. Doing trails a second time, I just would like to have as much of a different experience as possible. And you know, already the pace that I'm going to have to try to attempt is going to make it different enough. But the AT, I'll do largely, I mean, pretty much entirely in the winter, essentially. So that's going to be a rather different experience than what I had last time. And then the PCT, I'd like to be able to do south. So I would like to be able to do the CDT north right after finishing up at the Canadian border in Maine.
Okay. And go ahead.
Oh yeah. So I'll hike both of those. And then I think that would take me into late October, early November. And so then again, looking around at like, well, what can you really hike then? And it's not ideal, but my 3-week expedition that I did in college, I did in North Carolina. And so I think that would be a neat way to kind of wrap things up. And also at that point, it's the mileage. I've got right about between like 95 and 9,800 miles at that point to get through all those trails. Mm-hmm. And so then if I hop over, I like the sound of the Mountains to Sea Trail in North Carolina, of a state that I have connections with. That's been really important. I took my very first backpacking trip there with my dad when I was 18. I did my big expedition when I was in college in North Carolina. And so I'm going to start at the coast, which it starts also at the beach that my family grew up going to over there on the coast of North Carolina, at Nag's Head, and then down at Topsail Island, and then cut across west. And then it finishes at Clingman's Dome, which that's neat that was where my first backpacking trip also ended. Right. And then from there, I'm actually going to connect back up and to get the mileage. The way I've mapped it out, and things will happen. There'll be fire detours and different detours on the CT, all that kind of stuff. So it won't be exact. But from Clingman's Dome, I'd like to hop on and finish up the Benton Mackay Trail, hiking south, and then finish everything at Springer Mountain to get my 11,000 miles completed at the beginning of the AT, which at the end of next year of 2022, I'd like to finish on my 30th birthday, which will be December 23rd of 2022. That just seems like a nice kind of romantic ending to the whole thing, doing 30 miles a day for my 30th year of life and culminating where all my hiking began.
That's a big bow on the package there. Very nice.
Yes. Yeah. So these are my dreams. These are my goals. I love to plan. I've got the whole thing written out. Of course, I'm just talking about doing it right now. I could very well get out and my hike could very well easily end in Florida. So it's fun to talk about. It's fun to dream. It's fun to scheme. I have absolutely not done any of this yet. I think I might be crazy enough to have what it takes mentally to get through this. And I want to give it a shot. I'm getting older in my life. So that's part of it too, is that I am turning 30 is I still feel young, and I think I will be young inside for a long time, but my body only has a few more years before it starts going the other direction. So it feels like if I'm ever going to attempt any kind of great athletic feat like this, I think now is my time in life. So I'm going for it.
Okay, so the finish date is hopefully December 23rd. What is the start date on the Eastern Continental Trail in Key West?
January 1.
January 1. Okay, giving yourself 363 days. Very good.
That's it. Yeah, I'm going to try to use the whole thing.
Not 363. I guess it's, what would it be? 358, something like that. So.
Yeah, right. And then, if I don't finish on my birthday, I still have a week of leeway that's built in there.
Right.
To still get it in the year. Yeah, so
Smart.
it works out.
Smart. Very good. Hey, Prof, you know where we are?
I think I might have an idea. Why don't you tell me?
We are at that time of the episode where I ask for your pro tip insight of the week. What little secret insight, piece of wisdom can you share with our listeners to make their next outdoor experience even better?
Yes. So this is a tip that I picked up in my second thru hike. Has to do with water filtration. And I learned this before I even got Giardia. But water filtration is important, obviously. Anybody that's familiar with long distance hikes and the gear associated with it is familiar probably with the Sawyer squeeze. I learned that back flushing the Sawyer squeeze is so much easier if you give it just a little tap on a rock or a log or something like that. It just loosens up the dirt like crazy, and you can really clear it out. It's wild. I'd back flush just about every time I used it, and I would blow out till I could see clear water, and that was great, but it'd still be kind of slow. But I think in Julian on the PCT, just in the first little bit, some of my friends had said like, oh, if you tap your filter, you can get a lot more of the dirt out. And sure enough, you give it a little tap, and it really starts to pour out, and you can clear your filter up a lot better. So maybe people already know that, but that's just a tiny thing that made my life so much easier when I heard it. So if you've got a Sawyer squeeze, give it a little tap when you're back flushing, and it's going to go a lot smoother for you.
Excellent. You hate to see that slow trickle of water. So that's an excellent pro tip. Thank you for that. All right. So there you have it. That's it. This bonus episode for season 2 is in the books almost. I hope our listeners enjoyed our time with Prof. I want to thank him for joining us this week. Prof, how can our listeners keep up with you on social media, and where can they find updates on your latest adventures?
Sure. Yeah. So I pretty much post everything just on Instagram. That's about all that I use. And so it's Prof_Carl.
Okay. As in Professor Carl.
As in Professor Carl. That's it.
There you go. Remember to check out the pod on social media as well. We are on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter. And if you have comments or clips you want to share, you can send it to me at johnfreakinmuir@gmail.com. Prof, I'm also looking to you to share a recommendation for some adventure media with our listeners. So that would be a book, a movie, documentary, etc. Anything out there of particular importance to you that you think that every intrepid thru hiker should be exposing themselves to?
Yes, I do have a few. And I kept picking some and then seeing that other people had already talked about them. So I'll give a few. So okay. I really enjoyed Legend's book, Free Outside. That's a really cool, just like objective recounting of what that experience is like. It's a quick, easy read. It's just a cool experience to see what that was like. Okay. I love Pursuit of Endurance by Jennifer Farr Davis. That's really cool. I expected to kind of hear mostly just her story, but actually it's a recounting of all these other fantastic adventure athletes and their experiences. And it's just cool to see how different people do it. So it's a great way to read one book, get a bunch of different perspectives. Journeys North is maybe my favorite trail related book that I've ever read. He's a great storyteller in person, and he's really just as good on paper.
Yeah,
Scout knows how to write a story. Yeah.
Barney Scout, man, that was an outstanding book. It was excellent.
Yeah, absolutely. And then my last one that's a cool little kind of history book that's just mind-blowing is Grandma Gatewood's Walk, about the first woman to thru hike the Appalachian Trail. That's this old woman that did it way back, and in some ways kind of saved the Appalachian Trail by bringing more notoriety to it by what she was doing out there. And I can't remember the author's name, but the guy that wrote it just strung together the story really well of kind of telling about her own life growing up to get to where she was as someone that grew up in the time period that she did, and then what her journey was like of being one of the first thru hikers out there.
Outstanding. Those are all fantastic recommendations. Thank you, Prof.
Yeah, absolutely.
And our final segment, as you may know, is the segment called "What Have I Not Asked You That You're Dying to Tell Me About?" This is my catch-all, so I don't miss out on any good stuff. So
Perfect. Yes, this is one. I thought about what could this be? What could be a cool thing to talk about here? And then I thought of something. My greatest regret in my first thru hike was not getting a picture of this guy that I came across. And I would love for somebody to maybe have a picture of this man. His name is Pa, that I met in my first week on the Appalachian Trail. And his name is Pa because his soulmate in life was his dog, his Great Dane named Anna. And when Anna died, he had her cremated, and he had her ashes put into a silicone pouch in the shape of her paw and had that subdermally implanted into his sternum. So he walked around hiking the AT with a giant paw sticking out of his chest that was his dog's ashes. It was one of the wildest things I heard on the whole trail. And it was one of those things where I was hearing about it in person. I mean, I saw it. He was hanging out at the shelter with his shirt off with this paw print sticking out of his chest and talking about it like he's telling you, where he was born or something, like it's no big deal. He did say he was the first person to have ever done that, they told him, which I do believe. But he just fascinating dude. And I never saw him again after that. I really wish I'd gotten a picture of him. So I would love if any of your listeners have heard of Pa or come across Pa or have a picture of Pa, know how to get in touch with Pa, I want to get a picture of Pa in my life. Okay.
And we're not talking about a Chihuahua paw being implanted into you. This is a Great Dane paw.
Yeah, that's a big old thing to have sticking out of your chest, and it's her ashes. She's there. She lives on with him. It's a beautiful sentiment, among other things, but it is fascinating, whatever else it may be.
Well put. That is a wrap from the John Freakenmuir studio. Any shout out to friends and family, Prof?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, my parents, my sister, my grandparents, everybody that kind of instilled the love of hiking in me. My camp that I grew up going to, Camp John Knox in East Tennessee, my trail family, just all those folks, Uncle Wow, Odysseus, Big Money, Jukebox, Peaches, Puff, Hot Take, Wild Card, Bullfrog, Ruthless, Snacks, Traft Pockets, just so many other folks that are out there, so many great people that meet on trail. Thanks, everybody.
Okay. And thank you for tuning in. Always remember, the trail is the trail. It doesn't care if you want to go downhill. It doesn't care if it's almost dark and you're looking for a campsite. It doesn't even care if you're sipping contact solution while you're camping next to an outhouse with Giardia. The trail is the trail. Embrace the suck.